on fake news, disinformation, and deepfakes. I've been a journalist, a professional journalist for more than 25 years. So this cuts to the heart of perhaps my personal greatest concern and fear about the current state of information and the internet. The internet's so promising in terms of what it makes available, in terms of information, connectivity, sharing, and learning. And at the same time, it seems to have unleashed this era where trust, verifying information, reliability is a bigger challenge than it's ever been. You know, we don't know what to believe or who to believe or how to even figure out how to believe and verify this information. So I'm fortunate today, we're fortunate to have two people who are very, very focused on this issue. So let's just start with introductions. Jean-Claude, do you want to start and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure, my name is Jean-Claude Goldenstein. I don't come from the journalist background. I come from an aerospace reliability, trustworthiness background. We have a patent called Containing the Spread of Disinformation. So I've been focused on this this problem for many years now. I was motivated to create this technology because, like you, I'm appalled by the way the line between fake and fact is constantly being undermined. As we will see, it has huge impact on brands, on big tech, and democracy. We both come from the US, so we'll probably get to that in a minute. CREOpoint seeks to leverage the best of artificial combined with human intelligence experts together to combat both damaging fake news as well as fake video.
And Gordon?
Thank you, Chris. So I grew up in journalism as well. I ran the Wall Street Journal, and 3 years ago co-founded Newsguard because we realized that the problem of misinformation online is really not a technology problem. It's really a journalism problem. It had become impossible for people to tell the difference in their Facebook feed or in a Google search result. Is this a reliable source or a source of misinformation and hoaxes? So at Newsguard, we identified 9 basic criteria of journalistic practice. We rated all of the news and information sites that account for 95% of engagement in France, Germany, Italy, the UK, and the United States. Every site gets a point score from 0 to 100, a red or green icon, and that's distributed through companies like Microsoft, which has licensed Newsguard for its Edge browser and other products, like the British Telecom broadband provider in the UK. And we have another business, very important, about brand safety to help advertisers, when they're using programmatic advertising, make sure their ads are not on these hoax sites and instead are on high quality news sites. And it turns out, based on our data, that is what is funding misinformation and hoaxes, and it's a problem that can be solved.
So to kind of follow up on that, you know, one of the big challenges I see as both a reader and a journalist is defining what it is we're talking about when we're talking about disinformation, deepfakes, and once you define those, even what's considered harmful, what's satire maybe, or just for a comic relief sort of thing. So how do we go about defining them, and who gets to define that? I mean, I think we've seen an interesting example recently with the Wuhan lab debate, for instance. You know, a year ago, that was, fake news without a doubt. Today, it's sort of, well, maybe there's a debate to be had here. So Jean-Claude, let me just start with you. Who gets to be the gatekeeper and make these definitions?
Well, contrary to the aerospace industry where I come from, there's no trusted authority. Like if you want to fly a plane, you have to test it after it's certified. You have to meet a lot of rules and standards and everything else. There is no FAA or DGAC bringing the level of trust that we have when we board an airplane. That's yet to be invented. In terms of the definition, it's basically NGO, journalists, startups, pretty much all agree. Joe Button will agree with this. Disinformation is when there's a mistake made by journalists, like in France, there were fake reports that Martin Bouygues was dead. But more harmful is disinformation, and that's based on the intent to harm. So if the people say that the virus was invented by Jews like the Rothschild or George Soros, or that there's the piece of metal in the mask is a 5G antenna that's designed to track you. That's not satire. That's believed by a lot of people. Deepfakes is a new phenomenon that is basically thanks to advances in artificial intelligence. Deep learning helps the people with fairly easy G2C type apps to create a video that can make anybody say anything. So that person could be a political leader. And people in France have seen Marine Le Pen with burqa speak in Arabic. Boris Johnson has invited people to vote for his opponent. With the elections in France coming up less than 10 months, we're going to see what we saw in the US, which is not only deep fakes, but also something else called cheap fakes. And that is slow down videos, say of a Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or Joe Biden, that will make them look like they're drunk or they're like mentally tired or something like this. So yeah, disinformation, deep fake, cheap fakes, those are the four categories.
And Gordon, obviously the way you described, your setup, that's sort of built into it in a sense to create that system of authority, let's say, or have a process around that. But how did you sort of come to that structure, and do you still feel that's the right one?
Yeah, so what we do is really we rate at the source level. Is this source in my Facebook feed a generally reliable news and information source, or is it not? The reason we did that is that is much more effective than fact checking. Fact checking is, by definition, after the fact, after a hoax goes viral. By rating at the source level, whenever there's a new hoax from a website, it comes with a warning that says proceed with caution. This site has published these other hoaxes in the past. So for example, we determined the first website in the world to publish the hoax that 5G caused COVID-19 was a fairly obscure French website, Les Moutons Enragés, which we had already rated red for having previously claimed that 5G caused cancer. And so by rating at the domain level, the website level, it arms people with a warning if that site is a known propagator of hoaxes. So this is a very complicated world. You asked about the Wuhan lab leak. When we do our ratings, it's very important that we maintain trust. And when we do our criterion of does this website regularly publish false content, it has to be clearly false, clearly false. So, we never made the mistake some media outlets did to say it could not have been it could not have been a lab leak. That's unsubstantiated, but it's not necessarily false. So we have to be very clear and careful as journalists not to overstate what we know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to your earlier remark about this being a journalism issue. First, again, I feel, there's always a part of society that kind of was critical of reporters. I mean, even back when I was in the 90s, when the only way for a reader to reach me was writing a letter and sending it to the newsroom or calling me on the phone to yell about a story. But, these days it seems so hard as a reporter to break through misinformation, and even if you're really knowledgeable on the subject, and in part it's because the speed at which these things can be shared on the big platforms, on Google, on YouTube, on Facebook. They're all claiming and have been saying now for several years that they're investing a lot, both in human terms, in artificial intelligence and technology. Gordon, let me just stay with you for a minute. Are they making progress? Are these efforts really making a difference? And can we take them at their word that they're really serious about this problem?
No, we cannot take them at their word. Their algorithms are designed for one purpose, which is to maximize engagement. It's not to maximize truthfulness. It's not to maximize trust in their brands. It's to maximize engagement, which maximizes ad revenue, which is their source of revenue. So for example, the January 6th insurrection in the Capitol of the United States, there's been very good work by researchers at the University of Chicago who found that of all the people who were arrested, fewer than 10%, about 8% of them, were what you might think of as professional agitators, Proud Boys, things like that. The others, more than 90%, are middle-class, well-educated people with families. The problem is they fell down one rabbit hole or another of misinformation, typically on social media. They might have started by reading InfoWars, which is very popular through social media. Facebook might then have recommended other hoaxes they might like to check out, including QAnon. So when Nick Clegg yesterday on this stage was so proud in saying that only 5 out of 10,000 posts have some sort of problem, for a lot of people, it's 100% of their news sources. And for a lot of the people, the insurrection, their news source was social media and Facebook. And there's so much that they could do that they refuse to do because it is fundamentally inconsistent with their business model of engagement.
Jean-Claude, the same question to you.
To stay with the insurrection and what happened in the US, which was a proof that what happens online just then migrates offline, like we saw also with the Yellow Jackets in France. But just to stay with the US, and to look at whether progress has been made. In 2016, the election, the biggest news was that the Pope had endorsed Donald Trump. Fast forward, and that was repeated by a number of people, and eventually some people believed in it because they saw that in their newsfeed, and after a while they say, okay, well, that must be true. But compare that with 2020 or even 2021, where tens of millions of people still believe the big lie that that Donald Trump had actually been reelected. That's due to two things. You talked about speed, but it's also the problem of scale. Platforms, not just Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, have two major problems. One is the enormous scale. If you want to take an analogy with the fire and the way the fire propagates, they're trying to protect like the world. And imagine if you had to be the fireman for the Amazon forest and you had to automatically identify all the fire starts and all the sparks that could come from anywhere. It's super hard to do, especially if you then have to react super fast so that the harm is not done. If you don't deal with a fire, there's a fire here, there's fire extinguishers everywhere and sprinkler systems and everything. There's been laws that basically help the safety of people in a room. If the fire starts, you really want to have something quickly to put out the fire. If it's a deepfake video, the problem is even harder than with hate speech, with that statistic of 5 hateful posts out of 10,000 is not caught by the machines. For a fake video, it's 35% that go through the deepfake detector system. So that's actually out of 10,000 to stay with the same as hate speech. That's 3,500 videos that go through. And so then what do? The machines have not worked, and you have to therefore complement that with experts who can help. And Facebook has invested enough. They invested $10 million with Amazon and Microsoft to help with the deepfake detection challenge. And that doesn't work well. So the idea is to maybe take some of the information that's high stake, political information, say presidential candidate deepfake next year, just the day before an election, could have a real big impact if it takes one of the candidates, puts it in a compromising situation. And then maybe quarantine that for a while so that some experts can act like the firemen of the internet and say on a scale of 1 to 5, we think that's complete nonsense and it should therefore not be propagated. So that's our idea. We pre-identify experts that go opine on different situations using natural language processing. The people that have been most mentioned by the press as experts in different situations can be pinged very quickly.
Yeah.
And then they can make a mind whether it's either fake or not fake, and that could help different things.
Just to jump a little bit ahead here, so one of the things that concerned me, if we stay with the Capitol attack example for a minute, we saw what we saw. It was broadcast live. I mean, we were all watching these horrifying scenes. We've since seen much more video come out, many of it shown unedited. You can see for yourself what happened. You could talk about the diffusion on Facebook groups, the AI, the human elements, all that stuff. And yet we also see just offline a willingness by people to want to propagandize against it, to sit there and tell us straight up that what we saw happen was not what happened. These were just tourists. They were just there on a lark. They were not Trump supporters. They were, all the things that you don't even need the tools we're talking about to have seen what happened. And there's this willingness by a segment, whatever different issues, to believe what you want to believe and just seek out the things that reinforce that, no matter what. Forgetting the platforms. Is there a way that we can deal with that, or is that just a function of the times that we live in now?
Well, let me answer it this way. One of the questions I think has gone largely unasked is what funds the sites that publish misinformation and hoaxes? The answer turns out to be virtually every company at VivaTech, virtually every blue chip company is unintentionally funding these websites. For example, there are more than 1,000 blue chip advertisers that advertised on the websites that continue to publish the Stop the Steal hoaxes, Chris, that you're referring to. More than 4,000 blue chip companies and the CDC advertised on websites that publish COVID-19 hoaxes. The reason this happens is in the nature of programmatic advertising, that the computer finds the cheapest place to place an ad. The advertiser, the agency, they don't know which website it's ending up on. The companies that claim to do brand safety do a very good job with pornography, hate speech, have not done a good job with misinformation and hoaxes. This problem led us to start a business in helping advertisers keep an exclusion list of sites where they're not going to put programmatic ads and have an inclusion list of highly trustworthy sites. We're working with Publicis and other ad agencies, and I think it's going over time to solve the problem. I think it's a very large problem. We're doing a report to try to quantify the amount of money that's going to these hoax sites, misinformation sites. But I think if the advertising community puts its mind to it, we may find a true solution in defunding misinformation and hoaxes.
Let me just jump to a last question. We just have a minute left here. You both are obviously dedicating your time, your resources to addressing this. Jean-Claude, are you fundamentally optimistic that this is a fight that we can win? Or is this just now the eternal battle of our, I hate to be apocalyptic, but is it the eternal battle of our time that this is a confrontation that will just endure between fake news and reality?
I think it's going to get worse. But like most people here, I'm an entrepreneur, so I tend to be on the optimistic side. It's going to be a mix of solutions from media literacy, which is going to take for a long, long time. And that has to start with school, library, everything else. There's policies that will change at some of the social platforms. Regulations, I'm encouraged by what's going on in the US and in Europe, Section 230. The US is a little different because it's First Amendment. But in Europe, with the Digital Services Act, the Thierry Breton and his team is doing a good job. And, you know, we've seen catastrophes before. The Seveso plant, a chemical plant blew up in Italy, and they came up at the time in Brussels with this concept of the polluter pays. And so if you're talking about attack, the wallet, from the bad advertising, if you make the platforms pay, then that will help, especially since there's going to be more cooperation between the US and Europe. We saw the G7, the transatlantic pact. And
Okay.
what VivaTech is doing here with Maurice and getting US and Europeans to talk to each other, it's going to help solve the problem.
Great. I think we have to stop there. I want to thank you both for all your work in this area. It's critical. I want to thank you all for joining us here in the live stream. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and well, we'll watch your work closely in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Chris. Thank you, Doug.